prepare yourself.
The opinions of the host and guests on this show are exclusively just that, opinions. That means that they shouldn't be the cause of your state of being offended. Why does everybody get so butthurt?
Okay, let's go. Ready, go!
Welcome to And God Created Woman, where the arguments are necessary for the best make-up sex of your life. Unless you're single, and then we suggest you just go fuck yourself.
All right, and God Created Woman show. I haven't done this one in a while, and it's great to be back with a guest, Johanna from the Vibrant Flow podcast. Good to see you again. How's your day?
It's been great. Yeah, pretty busy, but great.
Halfway across the globe. Thanks for joining us. You were on last time. We had an awesome conversation about the danger of people pleasing. That was a great episode, and it's awesome because I talk for a living. It's so awesome when a guest, I don't really have to ask questions because they flow like crazy. So you're an awesome guest to have back on because you have so much to talk about. But number one, before we get into you sent me a list of things you want to talk about today, and I'm like, yes. These are fantastic. But before we do that, Plug everything. Where can people find you? Where can they support you? You have new projects coming out. Where can they just find out everything about you?
Yeah, sure. So the podcast, the Vibrant Flow podcast, is available everywhere you can listen to podcasts, except on YouTube. I'm not there yet. But yes, anywhere you listen to podcasts. So the Vibrant Flow podcast, and my Instagram is at the Vibrant Flow podcast, as well as Joe M Music. My website is joemmusicofficial.com, and I have a new song coming up next month, the 19th of August. So that's a song that I've written for my podcast listeners, women who want to embrace their femininity. So that's coming up.
Let's go back a second, too. You're relatively younger. You're still in your 20s, right?
Yeah, I'm 28.
Okay, you're still in your 20s. That's young, and you embrace a very strong mindset on the roles that men and women are supposed to play. Now, you're not American, right? We have a different mindset, so to speak. Is that cultural? Is it the way you raised? Is it like, where's the base for you having this strong values in men and women and understanding the roles they have?
Yeah, that's a good question. But like last time in our last conversation, I mentioned that like the Scandinavia in general, I'm from Finland. I live in Finland. We are like the epitome of gender equality, which is a good thing and a bad thing in some respects. That the things that I usually criticize a little bit are, tend to lean towards the idea of gender neutrality, which is a cultural value here these days, and that's what I cannot really co-sign. But culturally, like, I would not say that where I come from is the reason. Just, because of what I just said, like we're really like far ahead when it comes to equality, even though it's not perfect, obviously, but still. So maybe it is partly because of my family upbringing. So I come from a Christian home, and that may affect it. But when I grew up and I was like in my early 20s, I took everything for granted, that of course I'm a feminist. Of course I'm, of course this and that, like all of the things that were portrayed in society. Well, not everything, but when it comes to feminism, when it comes to women, I was really on board. It was only when I started realizing that the values that I had co-signed and I had really like embraced as my own were starting to work against me and my well-being. That's when I started to question if I really believe this, and if it really is something that is rooted in our biology, what we know, like our psychology, and what I believe from a spiritual perspective, that, how God made us to be and how we thrive. So that's, I would say it was a journey in my 20s. It's definitely been a journey.
It's always almost like an uphill battle, like when you go against the resistance of your nature. There's good for it. I mean, like, I don't like to go with the flow in a lot of things, but I think when you go in the flow of like for me, I think we may have touched upon this in one of the last podcasts, was in relationships when I take the submissive role in my 20s and 30s, the relationship always was disastrous. And I had equated that to, well, you know what, I liked a woman that I'm with to feel important and to have her values heard and this and that. I went overboard. I went extreme. It's like, whatever you want to do, we'll do. Whatever you want, we want.
Right.
And that would, are you even a man? So when I became times, in my late 30s, early 40s, and said, all right, you're supposed to lead. You're supposed to be a man, that things wound up changing. Talking about that, one of the things you wanted to talk about was the emasculation of men. That seems, we've seen it here with the Me Too movement, toxic masculinity. I didn't really realize it because it was always in front of our face forever, but you saw throughout the course of my upbringing, sitcoms, television, always made the dad seem like the bumbling idiot.
Yep.
That's a problem.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. And it's definitely something that you don't always notice because it's so part of our culture these days in the Western world, especially. And I was not aware of that before someone mentioned it, and I started to be more aware of that. And I started looking at the world, looking at or watching TV, movies, and how my friends act, how I act around men, how I relate to men, how I talk about men. And I realized, there's a lot of issues there. And it was a wake-up call, and it's a wake-up call that a lot of women need. That's what I say, and that's what I firmly believe, that if you were born in the 90s, for example, like I was, you were completely inundated with these messages that aren't always explicit. They may be very implicit and subtle, but still they form the way we relate to men. And that is that we try to weaken men. We try to, emasculation essentially is castration. Mm-hmm. It's just a tougher word to use, mm-hmm. right? So it's interesting that a lot of women don't realize this, that they feel safer around men if they are weak around women. If you can make yourself feel stronger than the man that is present with you. And that, of course, it's a fallacy. It doesn't mean real strength. If we're talking about true strength that comes, I believe, for a woman, comes from softness and a completely different set of values rather than trying to put someone else down. But it's so subtle sometimes that we don't realize that we're doing it. The way we comment on what boys and men are, doing around us, for example, in a working scenario at work, the way you talk to your male coworkers, your male boss, how you relate to them, how you talk about them behind their back. For example, not acknowledging a man's presence can also be emasculated.
Very ego-driven. Yeah, we're simple. We like to be recognized and valued. When it comes down to strength, there has to be a correlation between being cut down, emasculated, and then literally your physiology is weakened. It's a state. It's just a mental state. You start there. I see the value if you take it to a grand conspiracy state and say, all right, what's the easiest way to wind up overthrowing the nation? Well, let's weaken the men. Let's empower the women. When I was a kid, it was, the mythical Amazon women and how no men are allowed on that island, wherever Princess Diana from Wonder Woman was from. All these women are going to take care of everything. A lot of women like that concept until I do wonder if there's a literal biological DNA ingrained set of coded, printed, whatever that says, all right, we can be as strong as we want to, but we need, and so many people are going to fucking pissed at this. We need to submit on a little level. The reason I say that is, so I'm faith-based as well too. Now I do have a lot of hypocrisy in the way I act, the way I talk, whatever, with my journey, my walk with faith. But the biblical hierarchy is God, man, wife. child, right? And the man should never put his child before his wife, and the wife should never put the child before his man. Man should never put his wife before God. I made that mistake for years, always putting my significant other before faith. But if my job as a man in the biblical hierarchy is to submit to my creator so that I can be stronger and provide more protection and provision for my wife and child, isn't that a biological DNA coded makeup? And perhaps a woman has the same thing to submit to her husband so that he can lead her to, I don't know. Whatever your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. And it is triggering for sure. So the way I like to think about this and the way I see it is, I do believe that God created women and men as equals, but they are different. And the woman's role is to submit. And that is so tough for women to hear, because it's like, yeah, I'm not going to be the submissive housewife from the 50s. Like, what the, like, it's so triggering, but that's not what we're talking about. Submission is actually a beautiful thing that is so completely and wholly misunderstood.
I don't want to interrupt you for a second, but my life changed. I've talked many times about, I was raised Roman Catholic, all that. I had a big questioning journey with God, all this. And in 2013, I said, fuck it, I submit, which was extremely hard to do for a very arrogant, pride-driven man like me. The moment I did submit, it's like the doors opened and life just became extremely limitless. So I wasn't weak. There's power in submission.
Yes, I love that you said that. And especially it's important for women to hear that from a man as well, because some women are still like under the impression that, okay, I have to submit, but a man doesn't have to submit to anything or anyone.
No.
And that's not fair. But the truth is that a man also submits. There are situations where a man has to submit, and you have a leader and in relation to God and all these things. So of course, and as you said, it is strength. And for a woman also, when you submit, it's just, you feel this freedom that you could not have felt unless you submitted.
Can we talk about what submission is? Like, it's not surrendering and saying, all right, I give up. Submission is willing, right? Like if we talk, like I do some talks about sexuality, kink, taboo, and all that. And I tell, I've had doctors on, and we've talked about, I don't like when a woman submits to me in the bedroom that is like, I'll just do whatever you want to do because you want it. That's not submission. That is not erotic or arousal. Submission for me is, all right, I am trusting you enough to lead this because I want to experience whatever. And that translates into a relationship as well, too. So submission, a woman is, she's giving it, right? It's like, it's not, you're taking it. It's her power to give submission.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So the power lies in a woman's receptivity. That is the true power of femininity is so rooted in receptivity, because you cannot feel the expansion that comes from receptivity and comes from submission unless you decide if you're willing to do that, to let go of control, which is so hard for women, because we're taught, like every single movie, every single boss bitch idea in social media or wherever is saying that we should be controlled. We are the bosses of our lives, and you should not like give power to men. Like, what are you doing? You are committing a crime against sisterhood and whatever they say. It's just, yeah. So there is tremendous power in that, but it's something that you have to feel. It's a felt experience. And I like the words, or I love to use words like expansion and freedom, because those are probably the best adjectives to use when you truly submit. It is a state of freedom.
That's what I was going to say. It's a state. Because if you run a marathon, or if you sprint a marathon, your body's going to be exhausted if you're not built for that. If you're always in a heightened state, you're going to be stressed. So, I mean, there's times, one of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of women get is, and I think this is a disaster we're in right now, when a man is vulnerable with a woman behind the scenes. This has happened countless times to me. Woman will date me. She finds me attractive because of the persona she sees online. We get to know each other. We commit all of a sudden. And I'm like, I can drop my guard. I can relax a little bit. I can sit there and be emotional. Oh my God, this is weakness. No, it's me trusting you. It's me changing my state, because if I was always in that heightened state of go, 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 that's not who I am when the camera's off. That's just not who I am. So with a woman doing that, what are the dangers, or society teaching women, you always have to be that boss babe. You always have to be in control. You always have to do this and this and this. I can't picture a woman being a, quote, an alpha, non-stop in a relationship. She's not a salmon that's built to swim upstream. It's got to do some type of damage.
Yes, yeah, it does. And we touched upon this on the last episode. Yeah, definitely it does. I mean, starting from your hormonal health, your mental health, if you're constantly in this cortisol pumped state, adrenal and cortisol, that's your food essentially within your body when you are always in that go, go, go mode. And I was in that mode for a lot of time. And it did damage me. I had, I mentioned that I had this pain journey. It was because of me being in that state constantly. And not knowing how to rest is definitely something that a lot of women deal with. We don't know how to rest. It's all productivity. Productivity is like the value. Mm-hmm. Like you are proving your worth with your productivity. That's it. And I believe that. I didn't if someone said that, I would probably question, but it was evident in how I acted, how I behaved, that was a value for me. So sometimes we say things like, yeah, well, no, I don't believe that. And of course, my worth is not tied to my productivity, duh. But when you really evaluate your behavior, you see that, well, there it is. It's constantly present. So it's time to, be honest with yourself. What's happening here?
Let's solve this problem, because we know it's not the women who are the problem. That it's going to be a 50-50 attribute. Men are the problem in this. Not a lot of men know how to lead. They're just not taught. My generation, so I was raised by my mother. My father was still in the picture. My father is my best friend. My parents are still married. I really didn't get to know my dad until I was in my 40s. But because he was gone all day providing. Nonstop. Right. The man worked all the time, gave us big homes. I always had to work for things, but I never wanted throughout my life. My father was the ultimate provider. That being said, we didn't take the time to talk about how to, raise. He let my mother raise the kids. So she raised us with strength, all this. That's what I was around. So I became attracted to women who called the shots, not knowing how to step up to the plate. I've told this story many times. I'm in my very early 20s and I'm in a relationship and driving to a Christmas event with a girl that I'm dating for quite a while. And she cracks a joke saying, just try not to be yourself around my parents today. And I was like, oh, she loves me because she knows me well enough to insult me and disrespect me, right? Because I didn't see the behind the scenes with my parents. I saw that they had a joking relationship, but I don't know what it was like behind the scenes with my father calling the shots or whatever. So I was raised by a woman who who had her, who disciplined the oldest son, all this stuff. Where do men step in, especially in a day and age now where they're not taught how to be men? They're not taught, everything from the military to sports, everything has dumbed men down. So they can't go into a relationship. And a lot of women are like, yeah, I want to submit, but I've got this fucking loser at home who doesn't do anything but play video games all day, doesn't help, doesn't contribute, doesn't talk, doesn't communicate. So a lot of this is men's problems. How do we wind up addressing that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. The only perspective that I can take is, of course, that of a woman and how I would act and how I want to inspire men to step up. So the tendency for women in that scenario that you just painted is that we start nagging, we start controlling, we start well, emasculating essentially. Like, what the heck are you doing? Like playing video games all day long? Like, can't you be just man up and whatever? So that doesn't really help. Well, maybe for some guy it may motivate them, but I don't really believe that that's a motivation enough. It has to come from, it has to be internally, like men need to be internally motivated. Women, on the other hand, very often, because of our biology and our psychology, we are externally motivated, which is a problem in some cases. But that's another point. So men need to find that internal motivation to step up. But women can inspire them by being in their feminine. Like, that's how I saw that men around me started to step up when I was in my feminine, when I wasn't that controlling. I'm trying to control everything, that hyper, nitpicking woman. So that is one way. I think that always works.
Let's talk about that.
So what a woman can do is focus on herself and how she acts. And that's what I teach my listeners, is that you can only focus on what you do. So
let's talk about pop culture and movies for a second, because this is something I've had on other guests we've talked about trying to solve this problem. One of the band Chicago, I used their music for the opening for this, and they did their album Chicago 17 was a huge hit in the 80s, and You're the Inspiration came out. You have that Peter Cetera singing about, you're the meaning in my life, you're the inspiration. And then you get every movie out there where it's shown that men are driven by women, and they mean everything to them. It's so good to tug at the heartstrings for a 3-minute song or a 2-hour movie, but women don't seem to want to be the responsibility for a man's life of being their reason. I've heard that growing up, where it's like the movies have told us how grandiose and over the top our romantic feeling has to be for our partner, to where she's the reason for everything we do. There's a quote, I haven't been able to find it again, but I saw it years ago that I'll paraphrase it, that says that man's greatest creations come out of heartache. And you see it where it's like when a man is devastated, what do? They build, they go to the gym, they wind up finding their purpose in life. And that's all out of the love that is lost. So there is a biological makeup for us men to want so badly to please and make happy and just have our woman seeing us as the white shining knight. But women don't really seem to want that in the long run.
Yeah. So I think the distinction, would be if a man, again, this goes back to like the internal motivation, or versus external motivation. If I feel like everything a man does is coming from this external motivation, that being me in that case, then I would start questioning it, because there needs to be that driving force for a man. For example, if I think about my husband, his first priority and who he answers to is God, and what he's been given his life, like everything, the work, family, me, is answering to God. So he's responsible in that sense, and he feels that internal motivation to be the best man that he can be. And I am part of that picture. But if it was just me, I mean, it would start to feel clingy and even feminine in some ways. Mm-hmm. That doesn't sit right.
So how much damage has cinema and pop culture music done to us? Because that's a state, right? It's an emotional state where we get probably our endorphins run. It's you just feel empowered, but that's not sustainable all the time either. I mean, it's a fairy tale. I'd love it, man. I'd fucking love it to be, the man I'm supposed to be and a woman I'm with is like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. You make my life so much better. That would be awesome. Yeah. But we have some issues with the miscommunication on marketing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a man wanting to romance his woman. I mean, I love that. I definitely crave that. I desire that. So it's definitely there, a part of the picture. But again, it cannot be that, I do everything to, because of this external thing. It has to come from the inside, because I am a man, and this is what I do. I serve, I provide, I lead, and the reason has to be stronger than just this external thing.
I remember
right?
that
But
the Bryan Adams song, "Everything I do for you," from Robin Hood. It's like, holy cow, that was such a huge hit in the '90s. It's like every woman out there loved it, and the title, "Everything I do for you." It's great for that, extended 6-minute version song that played on the radio. But then women are like, "Can you do something for yourself, maybe?" It's like, well, but Bryan Adams,
exactly.
Yeah, Bryan Adams told me to do for you.
It has to be both. It has to be both. Like, you can feel when it's off, when the balance is off. But I wouldn't, mind if my husband sang me that song. Honestly, it's I mean, and I do appreciate the fact that what he does, like, for example, he wants to get ahead with his work and do better at work because he's motivated to provide. And that's a beautiful thing. I respect that. And I respect that more than I ever did in the past when we started dating and when we got married. So of course there is that desire to provide, which is part of a man's DNA makeup, and it's a beautiful thing. So everything I do for you, okay, yeah, there's
Dangerous.
truth. I would say there's truth to that. Like, when it comes to the provision, like providing and being a leader. So partly yes, but then as we discussed, there's that shadow side. Like, if it's not balanced, then
Let's talk about the balance of that, because if it wasn't for marketing, that you have to get the Mercedes, otherwise the women aren't going to want to be with you. If it wasn't for that type, men, we don't give a shit about the cars we drive. I'm a middle of the road card guy. I like nice things, but we have to have nice things in order to maintain a woman. It's always a monetary value. It is not. It's not debatable. Men are attracted to women based on their looks initially. I used to have a friend of mine who was a psychologist. She was on my show years ago. She was a expert in behavioral, mental health, and addiction recovery. And she passed away, but she would come all the time on and talk about, you could have a 6'2" Adonis of a man who was just the most beautiful thing in the world, dressed to the nines, and a woman will look right at him, and she's like, oh my God. But the second she finds out he's a McDonald's cashier, she loses all attraction to him. So monetary value is huge. So we'll take the men. Yeah, we're not supposed to do everything for women, but in the end, long run, what is it? I'll just say this. I always talk about my personal experiences. When I went through what I went through with my police department, I was in the middle of dating somebody, and I said, listen, if I go through this hell and something happens to me at my job and I got to go take a management position at Home Depot, are you going to stay with me? Absolutely. No, I'm sticking through you thick or thin. That didn't happen. So what is the triggering of when a man bases his value on status, monetary value? Because society has told us that. We know that women model their partners after their father's ability to protect and provide, or they're attracted to deadbeats if dad was a deadbeat. And then a man is on top of the world, loses everything, and a woman goes, oh, I'm no longer safe in this relationship because he lost everything monetarily. Where's the incentive for, because this is what gets men bitter. This is what gets men jaded, and we all see, well, if all men cheat according to women, then all women are money-grubbing whores who don't want anything other than man with money.
Yeah. So you touched upon the provision fact, and, women do tend to gravitate towards men that are able to provide, because it's just a biological, like, primal instinct that we're looking for someone who is able to protect and provide. Even the women that aren't aware of that, like don't consciously aren't aware of that, unless they're completely brainwashed with feminism and they're looking for weak men that they can dominate. Um, so there's definitely that, but yeah, I do see the trend, like the societal thing, which is not that. Well, I don't know, because I've never been to the States. It's hard to say, but I'm thinking like, could it be a little different here? But the idea of like looking for status and the cars and having this amazing career and tons of money. I mean, people here, I feel like they do tend to scoff at that, like it's a little ridiculous, but it's still a thing. But I've never felt that. I've never looked for a man who has a certain status. It wasn't a thing.
It's definitely Western. There's a difference. Like I'm in the Chicago area, so we have massive mix of European women, East European women, tons of Polish, tons of Russian, all over the place, Greek, Italian. Those women are far stronger than American women, more stubborn, and a sure as shit lot more loyal too. Oh, it's always a joke when you see some guy who you've known forever and he has disastrous wives, disastrous girlfriends, and then years later he's with a woman with an accent who is a solid relationship, and you're like, what, did you get a mail order bride? No, those women, I don't care where they're from, just are a shit ton more loyal, treat their men so much better, so he consistently provides and goes out. So I think it's cultural too.
Yeah, definitely cultural, and like how you were brought up, what you saw. Like I didn't grow up in a family where there was tons of money or status or whatever. So that wasn't what I was looking for. And I was explicitly taught to look for someone who is safe, who is of moral character or has moral character and is strong in that, has a spine as a man. So that's where I saw strength and safety. That a man who I can actually stand beside and be proud to say that this is my husband. But yeah, money and status, that really wasn't something that I was looking for. But I can't say for everyone. Like, of course, there are people here that are looking for that. But perhaps that is because they were brought up in a family that was a value. Like you have to have a certain a monetary or work-related status, and that's considered safety. So
you got two topics here that I kind of want to bleed into, and they go hand in hand. One is the gender neutrality, and then the other one's getting that spark back. Let's talk about this for a second, where younger men are now, we've got everything from gender fluidity to equality and all of this. What is the danger of, and we'll make this black and white, male, female energy, man, woman, and going towards the structure of the biblical family, so to speak. And I know it's so dangerous to talk about that now. What is the danger of a younger man, 20, saying, all right, well, this is 2022. I think I need to be more tolerant and accepting of, I'm equal to a woman on every level. She's even above me in situations. Dumbing down his masculinity. What dangers does that do to make things have a flow and a neutrality? And then going back into your question about getting that spark back, if you have a couple that's been that way together, can they regain the primal attraction that they had to each other in the beginning if things are readjusted back on course?
Yeah. Well, to answer the second question, yeah, I definitely believe that. Yeah, with the gender neutrality, it's a tough topic to talk about these days because it just triggers people so much. But I firmly believe that if a woman is holding on to this belief that we're the same, so if even feminism has gone to the other extreme of thinking that, or trying to assert that we are essentially the same and the differences have all been societally created. So there's nothing in our biology that accounts for that, or there's nothing in our psychology that, it was formed because of society, and society is guilty of everything. So we have to level the differences out. And that is like the worst thing that we could do, is try and level the differences out. Should I say this? I get a little fired up when I talk about this.
Good. Get fired up. Go.
It's just so annoying when I see that people are promoting this idea, and all the while they are not in a satisfying relationship, or if they're married, for example, there's no spark, and then they wonder why. Right. But of course, if you don't know, you don't know. You can't, it's not that I blame people, obviously not. You have to have a lot of empathy in this. I didn't know a lot of stuff a few years ago. So, I mean, how can you really thrive in your unique design if you are holding on to this belief that you're no different? Like what a man can do, you can do. So try to emulate men around you. A lot of women do this. I try to do this in so many ways. I try to prove myself that I can do exactly what a man does, or even better. Mm-hmm. And that would be like if you outrun in whatever task a man, then that's always like a badge of honor, in quotation marks, for a woman these days. But you don't feel good. That's the thing. Like you're not thriving. You are forcing a model onto yourself that doesn't work. Like a tiger is not trying to be a bear. It's so freaking annoying. And then you come to a relationship. Let's say you get married. And I went through this femininity journey and understanding my feminine design better during our marriage. So I was already married when I started to learn these things. And like I mentioned last time, I felt the spark go out. Like it wasn't there anymore. So I felt like I was not in love anymore. I was struggling with my identity as a 25-year-old wife who now is thinking that I, first of all, got married too young. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And all my friends are single and they're blah, 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 doing something else. And I was freaking out, like I don't feel anything, and oh my gosh, and all these things. So the way things got better is when I started to focus on myself. I started to understand femininity and what that means. I started to relinquish control, which I still do because it's a process. Because that so-called Eve complex, it's a thing that we use, our word phrase that we use about women wanting to take control and thinking that everything is on her. Like she has to do everything. Like Eve thought she had to make the decisions. She had to push forward and see what's out there because she didn't trust. That's the thing. She did not trust. Okay. And women these days, they don't trust. I didn't trust. And I wanted to be on top of things all the time. I wanted to be that alpha women, and for me it was really easy because I do have this type A energy. I've always been very forward in things, and strong in that sense. But I didn't leave space for my husband to be in the masculine. I was taking the space. If you think about these things in terms of energy, you are literally taking the space that your husband, your man, should be taking. And then you wonder why he isn't stepping up, or why there isn't sexual chemistry or that sexual tension. Well, how could there be? Because a minus, how do you call them? The battery ends
yeah, they're polarizing, right?
Yeah, they're pulling themselves apart. Like they're not attracting each other.
Right.
Like there's no polarity there. So when I started to practice and learn femininity and how to relinquish control and how to be soft, how to be playful again, how to accept that my husband gets to lead, and I actually want that. I want him to lead so I can just relax and receive, which was so freaking hard. But it gets easier. It gets easier. And that is why I totally believe that a couple that where the polarity has been like is reversed, so that the woman is in her masculine, and the man is either trying to be in the masculine but can't quite be there because the woman isn't allowing him to do that, or he is in the feminine. That doesn't, well, maybe it works for some couples that the woman is in the masculine and the man is in the feminine. But I would say that for most couples it doesn't work.
No, that's usually the ones who are like my age, divorced. They spent 20 years, cooking and cleaning for a man, and he was out cheating. Now all of a sudden they're going to find somebody who submits. So that's usually the aftermath of a bad relationship. Are you familiar with Lilith at all?
Lilith?
The biblical. So there's, and I'm paraphrasing this big time. Apparently, and I don't know where this is referenced in the Bible, but Lilith was actually the first woman created, that some people they say. So apparently
right.
Lilith wanted to constantly dominate. She always wanted to be on top during sex, the position of dominance. God didn't want that, and apparently he destroyed her, then created Eve. A lot of women look at Lilith as their base for women. But that always kind of made me wonder, well, wait a minute. If God destroyed her, removed her from the Bible, and created Eve, why are you going against what he clearly says isn't the way? And it's a lot of people just don't, well, there is no God. I'm not going to submit. I'm not going to do that. You touched upon something talking about that sexual tension. That's something that we don't create, right? We're not, meaning that you're not with your partner all of a sudden, I think I want to create sexual tension today. It is derived from whatever natural process in your body is receiving the cues from your partner. So wouldn't that not just be a natural occurrence that has to fall in line with proper alignment? So in other words, if you're always going to be an alpha female dealing with a submissive man, your body is probably, and your psychology is probably not going to feel that sexual craving and attention. So isn't it in your best interest to kind of like willfully trying to submit?
Yeah, absolutely. And about the Lilith, I think I've heard that being mentioned, but I've never really dived into that topic. It was never taught to me or anything. And it feels or sounds a little iffy and weird.
Oh yeah.
But yes. Yeah. So yeah, it's totally in your best interest. But the thing is that you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know, then how could you try to pursue something that you don't know? So the problem here is that because we're not modeled this, like how to be feminine, how to be receptive, how to feel that sexual tension, you're not taught that. So how could you know? It has to be felt. Like with every single woman that has been on my podcast, that I've interviewed, that I've talked to, myself included, it was something that you take on trust, you try out, you focus on yourself because you're focusing on your own energy and how you are behaving, not how your partner is behaving, because that always creates the bad kind of tension and discontent. If you're focusing on what he is doing, like that's what I did, and I was so not content. Okay. So focusing on yourself, trying things out and relaxing, and you start to experience it, and you have to experience it to believe it. But once you've experienced it, you can't go back. And of course, like I'm not perfect at this, and that's not the point. Like I'm always in the receptive mode. No, I still have this tendency, and I'm very much aware of this. And it's a daily thing that you release control and you surrender. That's a practice. I like to say that it's a practice every single day. But the experience is it's a paradigm shift. And it's a paradigm shift that occurs in your felt experience that encompasses your body and your soul and your spirit. And it is so powerful that women that feel it cannot go back or believe the old paradigm anymore.
You bring up why sensuality should be an importance for every woman. Define that. And then define the difference between sensuality and sexuality, because we have a day and age where Instagram is nonstop ad nauseum, skin, and women. And it blows me away. You get the accounts that have hundreds of thousands and millions of followers with women who just have pictures. There's zero video content of them ever talking, right? So you see a literal frozen moment, a nanosecond in time, without the dynamics of what this brain in this person is. So there's sexuality, no sensuality. What's the dangers of not understanding the two, and how do women apply that more?
Yeah. So sensuality, because of our culture, I definitely thought about it as a near synonym to sexuality. But of course they are connected, but they're not the same thing. Sensuality is essentially being of the senses. So being present with all of your 5 senses or 6 senses, if you want to, count intuition, a woman's intuition into that, which actually now science is proving, which is really interesting. But anyway, so being of the senses, being present with your senses. We are so numb all the time, like especially if we live how society wants, consume. Just you're numb, right? You eat to be numb. You watch entertainment to be numb. You deny your emotions to be numb. You try to be productive, which if you are in that state all the time, it numbs out your sensory receptors essentially in your body. So sensuality is about creating that strong connection to your body, all of your senses, so that the neural pathways in our brain that connect us to our body, our muscles, and what we're feeling, right, get stronger, so that you get to feel more pleasure. And I'm not talking about sexual pleasure. Of course, that's a part of it, but just pleasure of, for example, feeling a piece of cloth on your skin, or touching yourself in a nurturing way, or smelling something beautiful, or tasting something. Like it's building that resilience in your brain and your brain-body connection, which oftentimes women feel like they don't feel anything because they're numb, right? Because we're just pushing and pushing and pushing. So we'll live up here, we'll live in our heads, completely disconnected from the body. So sensuality is bringing back the connection with your body and living in your body. And the way I've experienced that is that my pleasure capacity has grown. My capacity to be present in the present moment has grown. My capacity to feel joy has grown. My capacity to feel contentment has grown. So it only has upsides to it. And it is a daily practice, again, like everything I talk about. But sexuality, now it's part of that, right? So that sexual, sensual energy is a beautiful thing. And the same things apply. So a lot of women feel like they're numb in the bed, right? They don't feel anything. So it's a practice of reconnecting those, parts of your body that don't give yourself anything. Like they don't give that, like your receptors are not doing what they should be doing. And your brain is not interpreting this as, okay, this could be potentially really pleasurable, right? So it's strengthening that connection and expanding that pleasure connection or pleasure capacity, right? Which all women have, even if they're completely numb, they can start experiencing more pleasure. But it is a commitment to that, because again, it's just like you're training anything. You're training for a marathon. Mm-hmm. Not the best like metaphor, but you're training, so you're building that capacity to do that thing or to be able to do that thing. It's the same thing with pleasure. You get to practice relinquishing control and being in your senses, activating that connection with your brain and body with new areas that you never even thought about when it comes to sex. And yeah, that's how it works.
I do know guys who have like Instagram model girlfriends or wives who have hundreds of thousands and millions of followers. And there is the trend every now and then you'll see people do those short reels where the guys will show a picture of their girlfriend in lingerie or a bikini in a seductive pose, and they'll say what the internet gets. And then they'll show her in the sweatpants on the couch, eating, hair up, no makeup on, and what I get. And these guys I do know say, we talked about, sex life is not that active, this and that stuff, blah, blah. Where does that come in? And again, get as personal as you're comfortable with getting because you're a married woman. But I want to know, one of the things that I've seen over the years is I've never been married. So many people will talk. What's the point of getting married when you go from going at it like rabbits, attracted to each other, and then every excuse in the book? Well, we have sex once a month, once every 3 months. The kids, this and that. Or you'll get somebody who's online showing the world how attractive they are. I've been through that where you have a very, very, very attractive girlfriend and be like, all right, why does everybody else get that? I don't fucking get that version of you. So that's that from a man's point of view. That's a problem. What's a woman's mindset? Because I want to understand why. Guy always wants sex. Well, there's going to be exclusions. I understand that because I've heard it. My husband doesn't want sex, blah, blah, blah. If women's libidos go up later on in life, but they're not having sex as much, or why are they posting online looking like $1 million, but then behind the scenes, why is that and what's the issue?
Right. So why do we post pictures and then at home we're completely different? Is that
right?
The question?
That,
right?
As general as is, right?
Yeah. Right. So, well, there could be many reasons for that. You're just getting the thrill out of the dopamine hit from posting. So I think that's a separate issue and should be dealt with. So yeah, definitely the dopamine hit, getting attention, the thrill, excitement of someone new seeing you in that way, right? So there is that, because in the beginning, of course, you feel that thrill because it's someone new. You have that rush of all these chemicals going on crazy in your brain that you interpret as being in love, right? And I felt like I've lived through this now, that you're completely in love, and then a few years later, because it usually takes about 2 years that those chemicals in our brain are being produced naturally, and then it starts to go down, right? Things start to get more normal, so to speak. So it is a commitment. Like I don't know if there's any other answer to that. It is a commitment. You have to see it as something valuable, but I think femininity and embracing femininity has been such a wide, eye-opening experience, because that is the easiest and the most pleasurable way for a woman to go about this. When I was thinking in terms of, okay, now we need to commit to having sex. We need to thinking of it as a regimen, as something that you tick off from your to-do list. You're thinking of it in terms of this masculine energy. Okay, we're just going to get better at this now. Okay. Mm-hmm. I know our sex life is not very good right now. So we're just going to push through and get better at this. That doesn't work, right? Because you're not in your feminine, you're not in your receptive mode, right? So femininity and embracing that, the journey of receptivity, is the key to bringing back the spark in your marriage.
You keep using that word receptivity, and look at your anatomy. You are literally built to receive.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So that's what we usually base it on. We see it in our anatomy, in our biology. And when we start to honor that, you start to see and experience and feel those sparks again. It's different. Of course, it's different from the first 2 years when you started dating someone and then you got married, because it is a unique set of chemicals and hormones in our brain. But for me, I can say that what I feel now is better than what it was then. I've been feeling that, being super in love and then feeling nothing, freaking out about that. And now what I feel is better because I feel more seated in my femininity, in my power, which is receptivity and softness, which I didn't embrace before. I feel a lot more free and confident as a result, right? And I am a lot more playful. And that's what invites the sexual energy and the sexual playfulness to come in. If you are in this tense, rigid state all day long, how could you expect to have those sparks? Like it is like foreplay is not something you do for 5 minutes. It's something that you keep yourself in that state all day long, and then you get to have the best sex with your husband because you're in that state. It's you are practicing that state. You're not just it's not a task, right? And that's something that so many married women feel like, that sex is just a task, and that's
it's a
sad.
chore, and they leverage it. I've said it, text messages were the greatest thing ever invented, because women are cerebral, and if you're a guy who can actually write and create scenarios, you can have foreplay all friggin' day long. You know, guys like me who are in their late 40s, you know, maybe 10 years from now, my performance is going to go down. I can make up for that by keeping somebody at a heightened state of arousal all day long. And if I only perform for 15, 20 minutes, great, guess what? I spent the other 23 hours of that day making it, balancing out. We're gonna do a part 2 where we'll come back and we'll talk about the communication of how you bring these issues in, because I think both sides need to know, as a man, how do you communicate to your female partner, listen, I want to be a man in this relationship? And as a woman, how do you communicate, all right, this is why I don't feel as sexy? Talk about the Vibrant Flow podcast. Where can people, again, subscribe to you, reach out to you? You have a song coming out. Plug all this great stuff.
Yes. So I love to connect with people over on Instagram. Again, that's at the Vibrant Flow podcast. Send me a DM. The doors are always open, and I love to have conversations around these topics. The Vibrant Flow podcast, you just type that in wherever you're listening to podcasts, and the song is coming out on the 19th of August. Yes. It's called Dulce Sweetness, and it is an anthem of femininity and softness, and it's just delicious pop song if you're interested, if that's your jam. I also play the saxophone in it, which was how I got into music. I started playing saxophone, and I was really good at it. I played it seriously. I wanted to be a professional, but then what happened with my arms, stopped that, and I moved on to songwriting and singing. So that's all there, right? And you can pre-save the song. I don't know if you put the links in the description, but you can find those links on my Instagram page. Right. That's
Vibrant
pretty much
Flow
it.
podcast. Excellent, Johanna. Love it.
Yeah.
We're going to have you on for part 2 for this, because this is awesome. We could listen to you talk all day. Guys, this is And God Create a Woman show. Make sure you wind up liking, subscribing, and we'll see you on the next episode.